If you've ever tried teaching a toddler or preschooler how to read at home, you know it can feel like an exhaustive experience for both of you. And in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 mistakes to avoid when teaching reading to toddlers and preschoolers. And this video is kind of in response to a question I got 3 months ago in my Montessori versus Waldorf series, which was, are you teaching your daughter reading and mathematics at home since Waldorf schools don't teach this in early childhood? And so the answer to that is yes and no. And that's really what birthed the idea for this video. If you guys are new here, my name is Rachel from Confused Mom. Welcome to my channel. I share baby and toddler product reviews, activities, as well as Montessori at home tips. And I will drop a link to that series I'm talking about, Montessori versus Waldorf. But if you're just jumping in here, to kind of catch you up, I went to Montessori preschool myself. I always thought that's exactly how I would raise my kids. And my daughter had other plans in how she liked to learn. And so we ended up starting and stopping teaching her reading many times over the years. And that's kind of the mistakes I want to talk to you guys about in this video, because the Waldorf way of doing things is quite different than the Montessori way in that letters are not taught at all until 6 years old. While kids are read stories, they're really told stories. So you're not typically going to see picture books. If you do, the imagery is very watercolory. The kid couldn't look at the pictures of the book and tell the story based off of the pictures, or the story is printed out in black and white for just the adult to quickly reference. And that's how Waldorf really avoids teaching letters to kids until that 6-year-old time. As a Montessori person myself, I thought that was crazy. There was no way I was going to rob my child of the wonderful world of books until 6, 7, 8 years old. And I was absolutely going to teach my kid how to read, but again, my daughter had other plans. And I fortunately was talking to a mom who went through Waldorf schooling herself, and she kind of explained to me the beauty of waiting until 6. And so before we jump into the mistakes to avoid, I just want to offer this as something to give you comfort if you feel like reading is not what's right for your kid at this time. I've talked about this in my video on things to avoid in books for littles. We're pretty strict about the media that we introduce to our kids in our house during this time from 0 to 6 years old. We monitor the TV, the movies, the music, and the books. And when I was talking to this mom, she shared with me the reason that she was okay not having her child learn to read was because she didn't want her 4-year-old to be able to go pick up any book and read it because it may or may not be developmentally appropriate for her. And that was such a light bulb moment for me, because I quickly recalled countless times where we would go to the library, and then the early childhood section, they would have a display of books of classics like Arthur, Bernstein Bears, and I would pick them up, eagerly excited to introduce my child to something that I liked as a kid, only to read them and realize like there was no way I felt comfortable with my 3 or 4-year-old reading this book. It's not necessarily that they were bad books, it was just the concepts were not where she was at that time, and introducing that book either felt confusing or like it was going to introduce a bad behavior. If that doesn't make any sense to you, go watch that video on things to avoid in books for littles. All of this is to say, if you don't plan to send your kid to traditional schooling, it's okay to wait. If you want them to learn, it's okay to be prepared, because that leads us to the #1 mistake in teaching your kid to read, which is trying to push them before they're ready or not following their cues when they've lost interest for a time. I watched this growing up with peers where one family in particular comes to mind. They had those magnetic alphabet letters that go on like a refrigerator. I recall they would not let their child eat dinner or go out to play until they had essentially finished being quizzed with the letters on the fridge. That child grew up to not finish college and just was really a failure to launch situation. I'm not saying if you force your kid to learn how to read, they're going to be a failure to launch situation. They could become a very high achiever with some like anxiety or mental health stuff. All of it's to say that's pretty much what we want to avoid here. I want us to sink into Montessori's philosophy of following the child and recognize that while Dr. Montessori found there was a sensitive period where little kids took a natural interest in letter shapes and number shapes, that does not mean that that interest holds steady and through all the time. That means it might ebb and flow, and we want to be cognizant that we are observing our child and meeting them where they are at with those ebbs and flows. Especially if you are prepared, which I'm going to talk a lot about in these next tips, you have plenty of time to teach them reading and writing in a natural and fluid way. The next mistake to avoid is going to be teaching letters with the picture. So this is so common. A lot of flashcards you might see have a picture and then the letter underneath it. But then what ends up happening is the kid learns the letter and picture together. Even if you taught them this phonetically, so instead of saying A, you might say apple. And then when they're trying to read and trying to sound it out, it becomes apple in the sentence. So really just focus on teaching just the letter at the time and not a letter associated with a picture. You see that a lot more in flashcards, but that's a good book. This book I do like a little bit more because it's more like a seek and find. So when we are working on our A sounds over here, the apple is all the way over here. The letter is really not associated with the picture at all. If you are choosing books that do have letters and things like that, choose ones that are a little bit more spread out versus in your face where the letter and picture become fully associated. Which I guess leads me to mistake number 3, and that is teaching letter names and not letter sounds. Montessori, they focus on phonics, which is the sounds that the letters make. But if you've ever watched like Miss Rachel or any really kids TV show, at some point when they do the letter lesson, the letter of the day, they're teaching the letter name. And even if you sing the song, the ABCs, you're teaching the letter names, not the sounds. So this is a big one that you're gonna be constantly kind of fighting across. So don't feel like it's a fight, just always kind of be aware. If you're watching Miss Rachel or Sesame Street or something with your kid and they're doing a letter of the day, make sure you are following it up with the letter sound so that they can associate the two as often as possible. The next mistake to avoid is going to be teaching the letters alphabetically. Both the books I just showed you are taking you through the letters alphabetically. Flashcards typically take you through things alphabetically at first, unless you like take them apart and shuffle them all around. And this is where we can take a page out of Montessori, where you focus on teaching consonant vowel consonants together. So you might get a little grouping of letters like C, M, A, T, and have them work on 3-letter words that you can make out of those 4 letters to really master the sounds of those before you move on to the next set of letters and so on. And then the next big mistake is assuming your child can do it. While reading might be really easy and a no-brainer to us, and it can feel very easy to get frustrated at your child who you literally have done with them 1,500 times that day. Don't assume that they're gonna remember it. Don't assume just because you spent 15 minutes and they did it so great yesterday that they're gonna remember it so great the next day. Repetition, repetition, repetition is key here. Checking your expectations at the door is key here. Keep practicing short and sweet. Try to make practicing more gross motory. I know I showed the book before in a different video about building up your kids' frustration tolerance with Charlie Learn Something New. That's something I always reference with my daughter now that she's back on a letter kick again. She's gotten frustrated with herself knowing that she remembered something yesterday. She literally said to me the other day she felt like she had a bad memory because she could remember something the day before but not today. I just had to remind her about like the book and her frustration tolerance, and that feeling of when she's feeling frustrated and wants to quit is right before her brain learns something new. So really be able to keep your frustration in check, because your child is going to need you to be the voice of reason as their frustration comes up too. Right now, like I said, she's on a huge reading kick. She's really wanting to dive into it and master letters. We're trying to stick to 3 to no more than 10-minute practices a few times a day if she wants. And it's simple moments, like when we are playing with our magnet tiles, I'll have some of the ones that have letters out and I will say, hit the one that makes the sound, hit the one that makes the sound, hit the one that makes the sound. Really basic little things throughout the day incorporated into our toys. We also do this with Post-it notes on the walls, and I have the kids collect different letter sounds in order to get the magnetic version of it, where they can put this one on the fridge. So they trade me their Post-its, then they get this, and then they get to put that on the fridge. She's absolutely obsessed with our Love Every game over here that comes in their 4-year-old play kit, where she gets to build the different words and then trade in the letters for one of the little objects to win it. There's a lot of different ways to incorporate it throughout your day. So it's just like these little moments where we're working it into our day. They're moving their bodies, they're practicing the sounds themselves, and it doesn't feel like we have to sit down at a desk and do something super rigid, which I guess is the next mistake to avoid. A bonus mistake for you guys, feeling like it has to be desk work or worksheets instead of something fun. I'd love to hear in the comments of what other mistakes that your family has faced in teaching kids how to read, what has really worked for your family. If you guys want me to show you guys comprehensive video, more tips on actually teaching your kid how to read instead of just the things to avoid. Again, I probably won't do that for like 6 months because I feel like my daughter should be further along with reading before I tackle that. She's making really big strides right now, but I want to give her plenty of time for her to fall off of this phase before I guarantee that there will be a video in 2 months. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and notification bell so you don't miss my next videos on Montessori reframes from traditional parenting, as well as playroom tours and so much more fun stuff coming your way. In the meantime, be sure to go back, check out that Montessori versus Waldorf series. As always, my name's Rachel. Have a good one.